So Dave's handing around some Ffion. So we're really lucky to have today a duo of two big hitters in our sports coaching department here at Leeds Beckett University. Tom is a senior lecturer and is aligned to the Centre for Sports Coaching. He also takes up a leadership role now in our new centre in children and adolescent physical literacy. And his research interest is in psychosocial development within sports coaching settings, and as well as a wider experiences working in academies. He's also published work in athletic identity, talent development environments and traditions. And then we've got Dave, who's handing around some tools. Dave is also a senior lecturer and also a course leader in sports coaching on the master's programme. His research interests are in coach development and education, and has also worked in talent development and systems. And he's also previously worked as a research lead for the English FA and the Performance Insights. So hopefully today they're going to give you guys some information and practicals on how you, within your coaching sessions, can look around psychosocial development. Over to you, lads.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks for sticking around. So yeah, that's the plan in the next sort of maybe 25-30 minutes, Dave, I think. Just to explore how you as practitioners can support psychosocial development on the field. I'm going to give a little bit of sort of preamble really that will lead up to some specific kind of ideas. Okay. On here we've got a range of sort of sports stars, people from business, CEO of Diageo, our Leeds Beckett student union head, and they're all on there because they've got really high up in what they do. Probably school and maybe school sport, and maybe their relationships with learning sport, school sport, has probably had an influence on their psychosocial characteristics, which probably had an influence on their career progression, whether it's in sport, out of sport, in the business world. So, in terms of why would you want to develop psychosocial skills and characteristics, or consider integrating them into your own practice, it's because it probably gives people a better chance of going into the world of work, probably be a better citizen, and maybe be better at their sport. So we say psychosocial skills and characteristics. Probably use Adam Bedell's work, who's senior lecturer here, integration or interrelation of psychological characteristics and social influences and how they might ultimately shape our behaviours. Okay. If we look at the environment that people come from, we work at things like On from Brenner, school is influential on personal social development. Okay. School sport, big part of that. So as a sports coach, PE teacher, sports leader, director of sport, you're largely influential on people's personal and social development. How you do that is probably why me and Dave are here, why we're sort of partly doing this session. We're guided by a range of theories, models, concepts, ideas that tell us, we need confidence, competence, character, or we've got, things like the 5 C's. Going back to our colleague Adam's work, it can be a bit overwhelming, okay, around like psychosocial development in sport, okay. What does that look like on a pitch? Like right now, we don't know, do we? Because it can be very complex, it can be very messy. And that is a barrier in itself to delivering on psychosocial skill development within sporting settings, because it's context specific, it's person specific. As Barney said, the same interaction or intervention can have a positive impact on one person and a negative impact on another. That's why it's a challenging space to operate in. So where do you start if that's something that you want to do? So I'm very much aware this is a schools related day, and a good place to start might be visions, values, missions from the schools that you might operate in itself. Great places to start. So I was looking on GSAL, we've got things like confident, resilient, reflective, which I think sport can start to help to develop and complement what's going on in the school. similar with, you know, being the best that you can be, so sound like process-driven, task-orientated. Again, things that sport leaders, sport coaches can impact upon. So I think starting with the school values and missions is usually a good starting point. Do you need to write updates? And probably in terms of like how you might start to think about delivering, is probably this kind of continuum is pretty useful. So what we see in terms of psychosocial skill development quite often is we might teach some skills. We might do a workshop, do a lesson, get everyone in a classroom or something like that. So it's probably quite explicit and it's probably pretty planned in. There's probably a practice, and you know, it happens, you know, probably a practice where it's pretty unplanned and it's pretty implicit. It might just happen, so we kind of like catch psychosocial skill development through sport. So if I'm in a team sport setting, I'm probably going to get a bit better at communicating, for example, without necessarily it being planned or taught. So it's possible, but we can really enhance it if we maybe teach some skills. And probably the bit where maybe a sport coach, PE teacher, that kind of sport leader might plan the development of psychosocial skills, but do it quite in an implicit way, so it's fostered an experience as part of the sporting experience. So whether that's in the rugby team or whatever it is. So we're going to talk to you about a framework. Do you want to take over, Dave? The framework. So some of the work that I've done in a professional football academy setting, we created a framework. So we went from like 0, so no framework or much consideration for psychosocial skill development, to a working framework. We've managed to publish a few pieces of work around the setup and then the evaluation of it. Does it actually work? In terms of these sort of what we might call pillars, these 8 pillars, if you just look at them, things like communication, confidence, resilience, self-awareness, they're probably not groundbreaking and they're probably words you've heard before. They were developed in this particular club around me chatting to the coaches, watching training, being around, talking about what we think the best pros kind of need. And then working out a way of how do we integrate that into an existing coaching curriculum? How do we curricularise it? How do we get coaches to maybe support the development of these through coaching practice? A lot of my work is working with coaches, session planning and watching a coach. A lot of those, self-regulation probably underpins or is linked to a lot of these, and I think mine and Dave's role is to give you some examples of how we might support the development of some of these with some practical ideas, which is why you're here. And probably a bit over to Dave a little bit now.
Yeah, so I'll pass back to Tom in a little bit, because we want to get into the nitty-gritty of this a little bit, and how do we do it, and some of the stuff that we've been trying to do. So, when Tom and I put this together, Tom's really led this work with the 8 pillars stuff, and there's loads of frameworks. Tom showed them before: PCPEs, 5Cs, 8Cs, 9Cs, 12Cs, 4Cs, +1, +2, 7. You know, there's loads of them things, and as Tom pointed out, like a good place to start to connect with where we are. Like, well, is this place, this school I'm at, does it already have some values and some things that it wants the young people to be able to develop? So this is just a framework, but one thing, going back to when Ffion introduced me, I had a little sojourn outside of academia for a few years, and I spent some time working at the FA. I was working with the national teams department, so I was really lucky that I worked with some really good psychologists there. It got me interested in self-regulation, because self-regulation is like, if you read the literature on any of these things and you go a little bit deep down on any of them, what you find is that self-regulation is a sort of master mechanism. Like, it's a set of cognitive capacities that underpin a lot of these things. So one thing that I find useful is if I can develop some of those more base capabilities, some of these things will happen, or it'll be easy to develop some of these things. So self-regulation is like underlay, but it sits underneath. It's a foundation that pillars might stand on, which is why I thought we might speak about it now for a minute and we develop it. So, really quickly, if you read anything about self-regulation, first of all, it's really important. It has really strong correlations with loads of life outcome things about, correlations with earnings, how well you do at school, career development, all those things. There's lots of really good life outcomes we know come from people who've got high levels of self-regulatory skill. But self-regulation is not one thing, and it doesn't develop in a kind of linear way over the life course. So if we're responsible for young people developing self-regulation, developing some of those skills we just showed you, you've got to understand how it develops over the life course. And a simple way of looking at that is to think, right, well, when you're really young, when you're really small, like 1 or 2 years old, what one kind of type of self-regulatory capability developing is sort of base behavioural capacity. So like impulse control. When your kid has a tantrum in the supermarket, it's because they can't control their impulse. That they want the sweet and you can't have it. Well, no. Okay. So really simple. Those are quite simple cognitive mechanisms, and we usually develop them when we're quite young, like before we go to school. Okay. And it's probably why we don't send kids to school until we've developed. The school would be horrible, wouldn't it? Imagine teaching a bunch of kids who didn't have those base self-regulated capabilities. They're horrible. So that's just going on in early childhood, but then it kind of levels out. And what takes over are things that we might think about a bit more, that we would be responsible for. So it's more cognitive control capacities. Once this big part of the brain at the front starts to develop, your ability to plan, your ability to stick to plans, to regulate your behaviour in accordance with the plan, and do my homework on the bus tonight rather than leave for tomorrow, right? So those higher order capacities develop a little bit later on. And they base on the others. So for us, we're generally dealing with people, like they've already, hopefully that first part's already done for us. They've been in a stable home environment that's helped them develop those base self-regulatory capabilities. But for me this is useful because if I think about, so I'm going to talk some examples in a minute, if I work with younger kids, so kids who are upper end of primary school maybe, as I tend to do, just how I talk to them, I need to be aware of this. So if I'm talking to them about something like focus or distraction control, that's a capability I might want to try and help them develop. There's no point me talking about that in relation to long-term goals, because they're not in that place yet. All right? They're not thinking long-term. So if I talk to that kid and say, hey, look, it's really important you focus here on what I'm saying, because if you don't, you're not going to become an elite athlete. Go back to Kev's son. You need to think seriously at age 7 about whether you want to play rugby league or not, right? That's important. So kids aren't thinking long-term, they don't have long-term goals about it, so it's point to be talking that way. So even the way I speak to the players, my participants, might change based on my understanding that what I'm going to refer to immediate short-term things early on, and I might only start to refer to longer-term goals and aspirations later down the line. I've put this out on the desk because I don't want to dwell too long on this slide, but this is from a really good authoritative review from a group at Michigan University, who did a really good job of summarising what kinds of self-regulatory capacities have been developed at different ages, stages through the life course. And they're different things, and they accumulate over time and kind of build on each other. So I've grayed out these ones at the bottom because we're probably not going to be interacting with kids around that age and stage, and we're just hoping that they've developed some of those capacities through some of these strategies. So a lot of it's primary caregiver, parental modelling, early peer interactions maybe, preschool. We're dealing with this stuff here. Some of the examples we want to work through are particularly in that middle childhood, early adolescence period. So the kind of capacities we're talking about here are things like the ability to focus, not get distracted, down task. Things like managing my emotions, dealing with a bad referee decision, there it might be. Things like being able to plan simply, like I can know I'm going to train this week. I might not plan over like a season or whatever, but basic planning and emerging self-awareness. Right, so those are the kind of things we're getting into. And again, there's some strategies and mechanisms that we'll talk about that we might be able to start to interact with. point, of course, is that it's not just one thing, and it's not the same all the way through the life course. So we need to be at least aware, I think, of what kinds of capacities are emerging at this stage of development, and what kinds of interactions we might have with our participants to best help them develop those capacities at that stage. That's the point. I'll skip that. So the three examples we're going to look at, I'll give you a couple. Mine are the first two I'll talk about early on. So the first one is about focus and distraction control. This is with kids who are sort of late primary age. Second example, a little bit older, maybe a couple of years older, start to get into emotional management. And then Tom's going to talk you through some self-awareness and ownership stuff with kids a little bit older again, like early adolescent times. So I should say, well, I'm not a psychologist. I'm a coach. I've been a coach for 25 years, that's my job really. But I'm interested in this stuff, so I think a lot about, I read stuff like that, I read papers on adolescent self-regulatory capability and go, so what am I going to do on Tuesday night when I'm 12? That's what I've got, right? So this is, I have 3 volunteers who fancy themselves a little bit. It's a baller. Come on, Ben. I know you. One more. There you are, close. Right, just play basketball over there. Just over there. This is with my under 11s. Play basketball. It's like 11-year-olds. Yeah. So with my under 11s, it's what we do. They're playing basketball and coaching, and then I go, right, hold on guys. If you all put your balls down in the corner, please, and come up to me. Put your balls down, please, come up to me. Come on in, nice and quick. Alright. Somebody's paying attention. So that happens for me 8, 9, 10 times a session. Got 90 session, right? So when I first started coaching this club, that was the tradition. The cultural norm was when you're playing back, when we're playing, the kids play, I blow my whistle, everybody puts the ball away, and then they come in to me, the coach. That was the way we did it. Why? Why would we do that?
So give them a chance to focus it, distract.
Okay, yeah. So go back again. This is the alternative, right, isn't it? Play basketball. Hurry up. Right, come see. Bring your balls, come on, come in. Right now, 8-year-olds, you have started doing it already now. Can that help themselves? Can that help themselves? So that's why I did it. But I started to think, well, hang on a minute. I am taking away an opportunity to practice self-regulatory skills. So I changed it. So I changed it to the kids all come in, they bring the balls. If you've got a ball, you bring a ball. And what we do is we stance it. So if you stick the ball in the stance like this, right? And that's it. So they bring the ball now, get a triple threat position, and now I speak and I might be explaining what the next drill is or whatever it might be. But we do it, and now they're practicing distraction control. Some of the kids find that really hard, by the way. One kid, Harvey, you can see his face is like so badly wants to, sometimes he will. But we do it deliberately as well. So I said to them, because it was a change, it was an explicit change, so I felt I need to explain why we're doing this. And I said to them, if you're interested, go home and watch the marshmallow experiment on YouTube. Remember the marshmallow experiment? Where the kid has to resist eating a marshmallow. I'll come back in a few minutes, leave the marshmallow alone. And some kids can't, and they just eat it straight away. So, self-control, right? So, this lad Harvey, he came back next week and he said, "Oh Dave, I watched that video. I know what you're doing. I see what you're trying to do." I said, "Brilliant." And so then afterwards, what I do is, when I saw Harvey drifting, he starts to do this. You just go, "Marshmallows!" And Harvey would immediately be back in his stance. And it's it's something you have to work out. Sorry, thank you. I suppose it's something we have to work out. We have to practice it. So, also it might still be the case that there is a bit of a distraction, and that maybe still takes me a little bit longer. So each interaction maybe takes a bit longer because somebody is a bit distracted, somebody's messing with the ball. The point is we are deliberately practicing regularly, 7, 8, 9 times a session, distraction control. We're doing it deliberately, but it's a familiar, regular part of the session. Okay? Second one, emotional management. So this is a bit more of this was a provocation for me. So last year, this is all the kids, so these are year 7 lads. Last year, we had a bit of a period where there was a lot of little scuffles and nasty people talking smack to each other. Basketball was called trash talking. So these lads are starting to watch NBA basketball, they started to talk to each other. They got a bit nasty. There was actually a few little scuffles broke out over a few weeks in training. And I thought to myself, well, I need to deal with this. So we have some bust-ups going on. And when I was thinking about why is this going on, well, it's because we don't have skills to manage in that peer comparison situation. So now they're getting a little bit better. They want to be basketball players. They start to compare themselves with each other. And maybe now I want to go at James, and James beats me, and he's like, "Ah, you're shit." You know, that's what they're doing. And then I get a bit pissed off, and then a few times later we have a bit of a square up. Okay? So that's what was going on. So there's peer comparison happening. They lack the communication skills to manage themselves in this situation, and I wasn't giving them any cues. I wasn't creating anything environment to correct that or offering them some support. So I created this, I called it the build-up ball. So that's the build-up ball there. So there's no ball out in the garage. And what I did was, I brought it in to practice. I said, look, this is the build-up ball. And we can fill it with air, big bouncy, or it can get deflated. And the way that you speak to each other, you can put air into the ball, and you can also take air out of the ball. So if James goes past me, and I say, you're shit, then that's taking air out of the ball. That's a deflationary way of talking to each other. Or if James goes past me and says, hey, the last one, mate, that was good, I'll get you next time. Like, that's a build-up behaviour. That's it. I'm now saying something, having interaction which is positive and building each other up. So the idea was the build-up ball is with us every practice, and at the end of the session we had 3 to 4 minutes where we had the ceremony of the signing of the ball. So that was the if the coach had noticed, say James, do one of those build-up behaviours, he gets to write his name on the ball at the end of the session. And at the end of the season, whoever has the name on the ball most times gets to keep the ball, like a prize. Yeah? So what's this doing? It's creating an environment where we're making very clear and explicit what do we value, what do we praise and reward. And what happened was, really interestingly, he started with coaches, I would say, Andy, right, I saw you do this today, you get your name on the ball. But then the players start to nominate each other. So, Andy might say, oh yeah, but you know, Ryan over there, he also said this. Okay, well, Ryan gets his name on the ball. Well, right. So the players started to really endorse it, embrace it, to the point where we didn't have to do much. You got a bit of pain in the session, you had like 15 people going, oh, he should get it, and he should get it, and he should get it. So, what it did was it allowed us to talk about and make it really clear what kinds of behaviours and ways of communicating with each other are important, and ultimately help us manage our emotions through communicating more effectively with each other. Right? So again, deliberate strategies, just in a very kind of realistic type of setting, on a workshop. You can go and do a workshop on emotional management. We create a system in the session. This is the one from a little bit older kids with Tom's group.
Yeah, so this is around like self-awareness, planning, maybe around like ownership sort of stuff. So this is under 13s, 14s academy footballers. I think this can easily apply to any level, to be honest. But like we noticed, like so, like similar to Dave, I'm a coach primarily. I've got an interest in childhood development. So we noticed our players kind of like coming to training, not knowing what the session was about, not being bothered, just doing the session and then going home and doing that 3 times a week. And we weren't sure like what they were getting out of that, or we wanted to work out, well, how can they be more involved in what they're actually learning? And I think that aligns nicely to the school's curriculum, aligns nicely to moving towards being an independent person. So we also saw in, like, we used to give players like obviously equivalent of golden time, like do what you want, but it's something you need to work on, and balls were just flying absolutely everywhere, and they were hitting as hard as they can and doing a crossbar challenge, and we're thinking they're not the things you need to be doing. So we also felt when we're controlling the curriculum a bit, we were in some ways maybe inhibiting that one of a 13, 14-year-old to explore and have a go at stuff. So it was all those sort of things, but in this was like, we actually put it on the players. So we did 6 weekly reviews on them. Okay, so we would say, you need to do this or you need to do that. And we actually flipped it and said, actually, if we want to give them ownership and make them more aware, more responsible, we want the players to bring their reflections and their development ideas to those reviews. Then the coaches would actually then work with that, but the players would start to lead their own journey and start to work with the coaches. So they're expected to fill a sheet out prior to the review rather than the coach owning the review. Similar to goal setting, what is your next 6 weeks going to look like, rather than us saying your next 6 weeks is going to look like. What we found over time, this is when we're talking like over a season or two, the golden time in sessions was more focused. Players were doing more focused activities. That was just about nearer to what we knew their developmental needs were. So there was a suggestion that they were trying to own it a little bit. Better discussions in review meetings, more detailed discussions in review meetings, players owning their own process and being more aware of their developmental needs. So a small tweak, small changes, but we saw some big benefits. We haven't followed them through to professional and things like that, but they're a bit more independent and they own it a little bit more, which I think that'll have benefits whether they go throughout the football system or into the normal school system. So yeah, that was an idea. Have we got anything else? I think that was it.
We did have another slide, but I won't go through this, but it's really just, I think one of the recap points, come back to Tom's cross slide earlier, is when a lot of us in the room here, if we're involved in schools and we heard earlier about through schools, so from age 3 to 18 kind of thing, you're in a real position actually to do that long-term work, which we don't often get to do in sport. And so that ability to be age sensitive, develop explicit, planned systems and strategies, the things that really connect. Like hopefully some of those examples show you that it doesn't have to be amazing, and that's just me as a coach thinking practically about how I can bring this to life in my session. But the thing is, I think one of the things that's difficult about long-term athletic development is every one of them decisions I make about, well, bring the balls in means we might lose a couple of minutes of practice. Doing 5 minutes at the end for the build-up ball, or we're losing 5 minutes of practice. That's the way some of our coaches frame it. And I would say, well, no, we're just practicing something else. And actually, something else we're practicing is really important. So, and I might have to give up some of my potential performance gains now as coach number 1 early on in the pathway to lay the foundations for the coaches that come after me, so that those large, far off benefits do emerge. Because they're not going to do if I don't do my job as coach 1 here, if I don't give up my immediate short-term benefits within the game on Saturday. I've got to be willing to sacrifice that. I think it's one of the hard things, hard ideas to grasp about long-term athlete development that we all struggle with. That's it, I think, guys. Thank you.
Thanks for that,
We'll do questions at the end of both, so we'll have some time for discussions and stuff like that. So.
It might feel like.
That should be right. Thank you.
Right. Okay, so Ffion can't introduce herself. That wouldn't be fair. So Ffion is a postdoctoral researcher in youth athletic development. She's module lead on the Science of Sport performance course. Ffion is also a leader in our Centre of Child and Adolescent Physical Literacy. And she's got extensive experience in athlete development and elite sport. She's head of strength and conditioning at Queen Athelberg School, pathway S&C coach at Leeds United Netball, and women's head of athletic and physical development at Wales Lacrosse. Fion's focus lies in holistic and dual career development. Thank you very much.
Cheers, Tom.
Thank you.
I hope you listened to the last one because those two are definitely a lot smarter than I am. So I hope you pay attention. So obviously we just heard from Tom and Dave a lot about how we can do things on the field. And my specific area of focus is actually looking around some dual career development kind of side. Just a brief background about myself. Obviously Tom did a very kind introduction, but you know, I was a student athlete. I was these kids. I was very fortunate enough to get a scholarship and go to Liverpool School, and I played for England hockey. And obviously then I moved on to Loughborough University, where I did my undergrad, and then over to America, where I learnt a lot around the demands of being a student athlete. So I was lucky enough to do my master's over there. Came back, I worked with Warwick Sports, Warwick University and Warwick Sport. I was then involved with the WASP Super League netball team. The senior team was their strength and conditioning coach before embarking on my PhD journey. I'm going to touch a little bit of the introduction about my PhD journey because it kind of folded into why we've done this programme. So I'll touch on it a little bit, but also now, at the end of my PhD, I'm now a postdoctoral researcher in youth athletic development. And I'm fortunate enough to carry on roles at Queen Athelberg, so I'm still their head of strength and conditioning coach, so I understand the context, maybe not as much. I've been working actually a little bit with the state school sector at the moment. I've been trying to get into their environments and understanding it, but I understand what you guys go through on a day-to-day basis because I am involved in some of these contexts and these environments. And then also some other roles that I do. So I just wanted to start because this formed the basis of why we came to develop this programme. So I was lucky enough to have a research partner in my PhD where I was embedded at Queen Athelberg School and I did a holistic impact evaluation on their performance sport programme. I think this really advocates actually for some of the work that we're doing and the strong emphasis on why practitioner-based research is really important. Because I was embedded in an environment, I was able to identify some of the characteristics and features within that school, both positive and negative. And one of those things was how we were not upskilling our student athletes on key dual career competencies. But obviously through doing this and the positives of doing and embarking on this journey is then we're able to impact change. So I sat down, I sat down with Rob as Director of Sport, and we were able to impact and make a positive change, and this has made our programme better. Because we were able to evaluate it, we were able to address where we were doing well, where we weren't doing well, and we were able to make a positive impact. And around that skills development and dual career competencies development, we've developed a skills and personal development programme within the school. Just to take us back a few steps, this is the current demands that our student athletes are currently under. They're constantly battling the fluctuations of high academic stress, often coinciding with periods of high sport workload, 24 to 20 hours of academics, missing 2 to 2.5 lessons a week, 8 to 10 hours of sport, 2 competitions, and now on top of that they've got all of their external sport commitments. And not only that, they have extracurricular activities and they have a social life. So this is the reality of what the majority of the kids within our environments are facing on a day-to-day basis. And the reality is, unfortunately, this is leading to a number of impacts and a number of challenges for these students. So a lot of these student athletes, and this is all based on research, are finding that balance difficult between education and sport. They're increased stress levels, they find more pressure than they've ever done for missing lessons. There's a high injury incidence, competitive stresses as well as some of the stresses from the psychological side, mental fatigue, burnout, as well as extracurricular sacrifices and social sacrifices. So we've got to do things better, because this is the reality of our student athletes, and this is what they're facing on a day-to-day basis. Not every athlete, there are ones positive, but generally these are some of the athletes, this is their concerns. And I think then, going back to what Barney said, 2% of our kids are going to make it. So 2% of our athletes, or 2% of our student athletes, that I like to call them, are actually going to make it into the program. So the challenge I want to say to you guys, and as you as practitioners, is How can we provide a positive and developmentally appropriate experience for youth athletes, irrespective of whether they reach elite status or not? And can we help prepare student athletes for the transition to university learning and higher education? Because that generally is where they're going to go. And we now know through research, and a lot of the evidence, a lot of the work the community school sport here are doing, psychobehavioural factors have been widely identified in the literature to enable young athletes to cope with the various challenges of student athletes' demands, as well as kind of cope with the transition on to other environments. This is forming some of the rationales and reasons behind some of our projects. So what's happening currently within schools? So I think schools strongly focus on giving players accountability and responsibility for their academic and sports development. I think that's probably quite evident. That's a thing that schools do quite regularly. We are really empowering that. And we don't want to produce passive players who get benefits forward without taking responsibility for their development. So that's probably things generally in this room, things that we're trying to advocate for. But this has a risk, and I think Tom and Dave really kind of touched on it a lot. Without explicitly putting things in processes or into our program, these things might develop, but they're not going to develop as strongly if we explicitly then look at our program. So this is resulting in a lack of upskilling to allow the student athletes to maximise their time and their development while they're in your environments. And I love this quote, and I think it touches on one of the questions earlier. So really recommend you read some of this work. So this is Collins and McNair's work around developing, making champions and super champions. So researchers highlight the importance of experience and including through a challenge. This is going to prepare them for life. This is an important part of our development process. So we shouldn't take this away. However, it's also important to acknowledge the skills required to negotiate these challenges. So we propose, and Colin and McNair propose, that skills development is appropriately challenging the environment and big factors, so it's something that we should have within our program. So if we want to have this challenge, because we know that's important, we also need to have skills development within the programs and within schools. And it's also really important to hear the child's voice. I think this is something, and Tom, he's part of our centre in Child and Adolescent, it's something we're going to really develop is we want the child's voice to be the centre of everything that we do. We have to start listening to them. I think we know, but we have to really advocate and listen to what they're doing. And these are just a few quotes from some of the research that I've done. I think they just expect you to be more organised, to be able to fit your sport in. What we get offered here, most of us haven't been exposed to it before coming in. They're expected to know how to use it, when a lot of people don't. So then they don't get the most out of what they're doing. And finally, I struggle to complete all of my work as I don't know what to prioritise. So I think it's advocating that they know these things. Often, kids know they need better time management skills. Kids know they need to manage their time better. They know, but they don't know how. And we're not giving them the skills and the tools to help develop those things. And so, kind of following on from that research, I did a lot more exploring in this area, and the athletes, so the student athletes who found balancing sport and academic workload easier, generally attributed this to having better time management skills, dealing and coping with the pressure better, having a balance between sport and academic workload, and utilising their study time effectively. So we now know through a bit more research, a bit more exploring in a specific context, that the student athletes who found balance in sport and academics had better at these skills, generally. So these skills that we need to focus on for the many of what we're doing. And there are 3 stages to psychological skills training. So there's the education, so we need to recognise the importance of educating in psychological skills training. There's the acquisition, so actually identifying strategies and techniques. I think Tom and Dave there gave you some really good tools and strategies on how to do it in practice. And then we obviously have to do it in practice. And a lot of time, we just do this practice thing. We just throw them out there and we think they're going to develop it. We don't teach them the skills. So we're not teaching and identifying strategies that they then can take into their practice to better inform what they're doing. So what key dual career competencies should we be looking at to focus when we're looking at putting these programs together? So Debran and them have done a lot of work around key dual career competencies. So one's around dual career management. That's probably not no-brainer. Around time management skills. How can they manage their time better? Around career planning. So this again looking around that transition into higher education. Saying and pursuing academic professional goals beyond one's athletics career. Emotional awareness. I think obviously Dave touched on a little bit there. So an athlete's ability to recognise, understand, and manage their own emotions as well as the emotions of others. And then finally, social intelligence and adaptability. I think this is where the resilience piece comes in. So, athletes' ability to be able to adapt to diverse environments and to build some of those resilient style skills. And this is also supported by other literature. So here's another one. These are key life skills for sport. And again, some common things, problem solving, teamwork, time management, emotional skills. So these, there's a lot of literature out there of what we should be focusing on. And this then obviously formed the basis of the programs that we put in place, which I'm going to talk about next. The next thing also, as well as thinking about the skills, is that transition to higher education. We know it's a massive jump. I've been chatting to a lot of our athletes, so student athletes have gone on now, and they think the jump between secondary school to university is massive. We're often spoon-fed. We're often spoon-fed in a lot of the environments that we're in the school environments that we're in. It's safe. If they don't turn up, they get a prep strike. If you don't do your homework in time, you might get detention and things like that. Doesn't happen at university. If you don't turn up, we're not going to chase you. You might get an email later from resources saying things. But we're going from a really spoon-fed environment to not a very spoon-fed environment. And this increased then responsibility. So it's on you to get yourself here, it's on you to get yourself to your lectures, it's on you to get yourself up in the morning, it's on you to do your homework and coursework and submit it on time. You don't have that constant badgering that we get within school environments. It's also a very research-led format. So when we come to university, a lot of our lectures are research-led teaching. These guys are a lot better lecturers than I am. They'll advocate this a lot more. But again, we don't understand a lot of it's kind of through and formed from research. So these are also things we need to think about how we can prepare them. Prepare them for that big jump, prepare them for the spoon-fed environment, and also prepare them for increased responsibility in a research-led program. So this kind of developed the basis of this program. So we just did a pilot project at Queen Athelburgos, and it's something then to form the basis of what we're going to do moving forward. So the first was we wanted to examine the effectiveness of a school-based supercurricular program and one, upskilling student athletes on key psychosocial and psychological skills for combining sport and education. And the second, provide them with an introduction to university learning to help prepare the students for higher education study. So a little bit, just whisk through some of the methodologies. So we had 23 student athletes. We had an intervention and a control group. So we had those who didn't go through the supercurricular program, and we had those who did. So those who did were in the intervention group. They had 9 additional sessions across 2 terms. The second group had no sessions, they just did their normal school life. And we did some pre and post measures, so we measured some their skills, so their life skills, their dual career skills before, and then we did them at the end of the program with both the intervention and the control. We also did some follow-up focus groups with the intervention group, so talk to them, advocating for more about child's voice, get their perspective on the program. And also, we actually are going to do follow-up interviews into university. Obviously, time hasn't got that, but 3 months into university, I'm going to do follow-up interviews with these kids and see how it's helped better potentially prepare them. So that's probably the one bit missing in terms of results. This is what the program content looked like. So these are just pictures. So at the end, they came and visited Leeds Beckett University. Tom was involved with some of that. So we had a theme to what we're doing, and we had skills that we wanted to. I think the key thing we wanted to make this was a skills development program. This wasn't a lecture, this wasn't us preaching for them, it was all run through activities. So when they came in, they immediately had activities, and we gave them then tools to practice in this session. So we might give them a tool around Ffion Rongan, she's one of our associate doctorate, she's now at Nottingham University, she came in and did a workshop on time management skills. But it wasn't the sake of preaching for 45 minutes, she gave them tools, and then they had to practice. They used those tools about how they can manage their lives. Very activity focused. Because that's how we feel like they learn better, they're engaged in it more, and they're interacting. So, we ended up with a visit at Leeds Beckett University, where we can see here. So they had exposure to a lecture. So they came in and experienced what it's like in this room. We had a seminar in one of the seminar rooms up there, the labs. Did some stuff in the gym, and then we ended with a bit of fun nutrition things so that they can have a snack at the end. So what were some of the results of the program? I think the first thing to note, the intervention group showed improvements in all competencies from pre to post-intervention. The control group exhibited greater improvements than the intervention group, just in communication and emotion control. So just 2 factors across that. The intervention group demonstrated significant increases in time management, social intelligence and adaptability, probably linking to the specific workshops we did on time management skills and the specific workshops we did on resilience, so their ability to be able to socially adapt. The control group showed a decrease or no improvement in dual career management, career planning and social intelligence and adaptability. I think this really advocates for, so across 2 terms, those kids that weren't in the intervention group either did not improve or decrease in some of their dual careers. So we just know actually it's not necessarily going to happen through practice, as much as we would love it to. Without some explicit education and tools that we're giving them, they're not necessarily going to get better. So obviously I was very happy that these results came out because I advocated a little bit more for our programme and what we're doing. Just thinking a little bit more, we did a process evaluation. So we looked at the programme and we evaluated it from a process side. And we can see here, the kids they scored it on their usefulness, enjoyment, interesting, stimulating, how much they learned. And out of a score of 5, 3 of them are higher than 4.5. So that's really advocating for, usefulness, enjoyment. As well as obviously here, out of 5 as well, they felt like they developed in all their skills. 4 out of 5 is a good score in terms of when we're looking at these LIFO scales. So what we're doing, obviously, they felt like they developed, they agreed that they developed in all of these skills through being part of that programme. And here's just again advocating for their voice. This is from the focus groups that we did. I thought it was good in terms of this is typed exactly how they said it. I thought it was good in terms of letting us learn about different skills, so like effective time management, communication, all of these different things that allow us to excel in work life and both sport life. I was going to say it has really helped with my assignments as well. I can hand them in on time, with about a couple of days prior, so I can get it remarked and do some more stuff on it if needs be. To be honest, I was never really too familiar with the kind of like campus, all of that type of stuff. So to go around Leeds Beckett, it made you quite familiar with how uni life works, how it is different to school, and just gives you more of an insight into what it is like. These are just a few. There's a lot more. I could have posted a whole load around, but I think it really advocates for the work and actually the experience of I think that's more important than me telling you. It's what the kids are telling you and the experiences that they had on this programme. I think this again is part of the process evaluation. I want to touch on a few things. So things that I think, this is the first year we did it. It was a pilot programme. So we always can make it better. And I think that's the big thing is we're going to take the feedback that the kids gave, feedback from our process evaluation stuff, and we're going to improve this programme moving forward. But I think some of the things we can improve about the programme, one of the things the kids said is more time focused on managing stress and pressure, as what athletes of our age tend to struggle with the most. So I think that's advocated from them. This is something that we probably need to touch on more within our environments, is how do we help them manage and develop that and deal with that pressure. They want more templates. So again, this is around actually, we think that the kids will just learn it from the environment. We need to give them that, that 3 psychological stages. We need to give them those tools. We need to start helping them by providing with those tools on how they can manage their skills and their time and provide sport and education. I think this is a really interesting one. It's introduced it earlier. So we did this for 16, 18-year-olds, and they're like, we wish we'd had this at 14. It could have helped us with 2 years less of struggle around some of these skills. So actually, now, can we advocate for this earlier? Can we get this in, before GCSEs? These kids, if anything, at GCSEs are probably balancing even more because they're playing probably even more multiple sports in those contexts. So something to think about in schools is, can we introduce these programs early to help them with that skills and help them, and then we can challenge them. The environment, the reality is they're going to be balancing a lot of things, but can we help them with that balance? And I really like this one. They said, share with group how individuals have progressed from weeks. So again, we can make it a collaborative and developmental process. Get them to share with each other. I think it's around a bit what Dave and Tom said. It's actually eventually get them to empower each other, to get them to learn from that. And that's, I think, where this programme can go. So kind of what's the future of this? So based on we know the reasons why it's important, which I advocate from, and the rationales, but what the future is next. So one of the things we want to do, and one of the things we're really passionate about within our research, is optimising student-athlete holistic development. So taking stuff now, which I talked about today around psychosocial education. Those who have read a lot of my research before will know my stuff around rest and recovery, planning training effectively within schools, managing that training load. And then we think this middle piece is also really important. So we've actually just brought on Sarah Charnley, who's actually talking at us all. Because Because again, if they don't have the building blocks of nutrition, everything else, mental and physical, goes out the water. You know, if we're not fueling effectively. And this is an area that schools don't get much of. So we've now developed a program that we want to now advocate and bring out to our schools across the country. So we're advocating for a multi-school skills development education program. So we want to release this next year when we can come into schools and we can help you guys with this dual career development model. And we're going to put on sessions around rest and recovery, around planning, training load and fueling, dual career competencies and life skills, and dual career planning and transition. So this is kind of where we're going now. So based on the part of the research is then hopefully going into schools next year and implementing this programs into some environments like that. But it's also regardless something that you guys can consider implementing yourselves within it. Kev will probably kill me for saying that, because he probably wants to do it. But no, thank you for listening. I think we have, what's the time?
52.
52, we've got about 10 minutes. So either to Dave or Tom as well, if they, you know, if you've got questions for them, or myself, whatever. Barney looks desperate to ask questions.
Yeah, that's great. Having known you for 4 years, it's actually so good to hear more about your work. So that's really
we actually lived together for 3 years. So.
And it's obviously not far away, same space. But so you talked about how one of the challenges is that they do so much, and you're giving them you're giving them something more to do with the additional program.
Yeah.
So just like your reflections, then how do you reconcile that? And I guess that question is how you balance in the short and long-term benefits and challenges.
Yeah. It's a really good question actually, and something that we discussed as a school and how we implemented this. And so what we explicitly, so in the sessions, what you saw there, the program sessions, we didn't challenge to do anything outside of that, apart from just go then into life and practice the skills. So we were very explicit, like everything that we do in the session would be done in that session time. So when we came over, we taught them the skills, and then we go, okay, go now into your normal life practice and try and practice those skills, so just in your regular school life. So that's one of the ways. I think we didn't then go, okay, go away now and research and all this stuff and come back to us next week. So we didn't provide any homework. It was then just purely, and then we embedded it actually in the school sport program. So the kids that were doing it, gave up one session a week. So just to put it in context, Queen Ethelberga's there. The sport's embedded in the timetable. So we talked, and Tom and Rob, they said, because we think this is valuable, we'll give up one sports session a week. So we have a double block on a Thursday, so we have period 5 and period 6, and the kids who were on the inspection did it in their period 6. Because we thought the benefit of it long term. But again, I think if we can get it in earlier, it also help with that. So I think it's actually realising the kids play so much sport, we already know the demands, actually taking 45 minutes out of their time to do something different in the grand scheme of their development, it's going to benefit them more probably than if they're out and again on another pitch session from that side. So yeah, good question.
Yeah.
James?
Yeah,
Also, please ask questions to Tom and Dave.
The first one's an observation for what you did, Dave, with, I like how you reframed it, we're just practicing something different, because I spoke with coaches last week about integrating psychosocial skills, and I've got a question for you about it. And I think coaches don't realise they do it. They actually already are doing it, and we've just got to put a spotlight on it that actually when you said the kids started to write their name on the ball and recommend each other's, then showing commitment, and a coach then needs to recognise that as another psychosocial quality. So that was really interesting, how you framed it. I'm going to steal that. The next question, my question then is to Ffion, but it will also include you, Dave, and Tom, because the dual career competency, from my research, we've got 3 years of data of this now. The dual career competency questionnaire doesn't tell us that they've learned it.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you know over 9 weeks, have they just memorised or have they learned a behaviour? And the dual career competency tells us the possession of the quality, competency, not necessarily the application of that competency.
Yeah.
So then, to the question I've written down, and this is where I'm stuck on my research right now, is how do you capture these moments and these psychosocial development opportunities that actually a school or how you might want to showcase, because that might access funding or that might show teach about reports and you have to justify. So how do you capture psychosocial development?
I'll start and then Troy can piggyback on. I think one of the things, and that's I think really why we want to do the focus groups, but also mainly why we want to do follow-up interviews, because we actually, I think, we've taught them the first two, we've taught them the education, we've taught them the skills, but they need to go practice. And I think that's the really big part, and that's why that takes time. And I see these kids every day, so I challenge them like, did you practice those skills? Have you been using? They come up to me, oh, I'm struggling with this. Did you use your workbook? Or remember those things about problem solving? Did you think about those? So I'm just there, because and you guys are in a 40 right, you've got to see them every day. So you can challenge and then just keep reiterating. And then that's what you said around them talking to each other. So Jim McKenna is a professor here, he's a lot smarter than I am. He said then around psychosocial is actually then getting them to pass on the skills to other students. Because that's again another way we can transfer skills, and how they can learn is actually then we maybe give them a couple of the tools, but then we advocate for them who weren't on the programme to go tell them what they learned, to go tell them that, and again it's putting the practice, but I think the practice part's massive, and that's be interesting when we do the follow-up interviews, because I think that will allow them time to reflect on that side of things. But I think it's the regular checking in and the regular practice then that we really have to enforce. From a research capture perspective, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't mind unless you want to go down. So the academy that I did most of my research informed that. We had a couple of ways to do it. So to help coaches, we created an observable, almost checklist for each of the 8 characteristics with 3 or 4 behaviours that people, and then aged and staged that. So younger ones, confidence might be just somebody asking questions and trying a new skill a bit quicker. Whereas with the older ones, it was trying to impart to influence the team to perform. So we had an observable checklist, age and staged, where like a coach in common language that gave a bit of so-and-so's doing these a lot. We think that characteristic might be developing. When you're talking about like research and evaluation, we use like a self-report that we created bespoke for that club, and then use like a pre-validated like PCDs questionnaire, start and end of the season, which was a bit more traditional, not perfect, but it did the evaluation piece to show us, for example, from the coach, it was observable checklist.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, so
I was just going to sort of jump in on that. It's obviously the work that Ffion's done at school is fantastic, and I sort of think back to what Sue Woodruff was saying about the elite athlete that she was talking about and the deeper thinker that she was as well. So if I look at the students on the cohort that Ffion's taking this process through, it's the deeper thinkers. Do you know what I mean? It's the ones that want to really challenge themselves, and they challenge themselves within sport as well, and probably some of our better sporty students that are on there, whereas some of them have gone, oh, I don't want to do that, it's extra work, and I'm not missing a session, and it's, they get a little bit close-minded by sport, and I think if you can tap into that, like what Fion's trying to do with this, and successfully done so with the ones that she's been on this journey with her, it's just broadening the horizons a little bit outside of the basketball court, the football pitch, whatever it is, and I think the more, and I agree, we're due to chat on how we can improve things and stuff, but I think if we can get it in school early, if we can start to tap into that deeper thinking when they're younger, it's only going to open their horizons up and extend that deeper thinking when they're older, which then they can get better time management and hopefully get better at sport and obviously the academic as well. So. But yeah, no, it's really good, and all the work that Ffion's done, I've really, really sort of endorsed what she's done. It has a massive impact on the students.
I paid him to say that.
Just a quick response to that. Couple of things. One, I like the idea of like trying to push. Well, one of the points I was trying to make that I probably didn't because I was rushing, but some of this stuff you can start dead early. Like. I've done this work with 8-year-olds, like you can do it, but you've got to be developing the right capacities for the right stage of development. So I think pushing stuff early is great, but if you try to do long-term planning with 13-year-olds, you're going to struggle, because there's a maturational process going on, a bit like you wouldn't be squatting heavy with 12-year-olds, like the same thing. So yeah, I think it's really good to be deliberate and to think how can we start this kind of work early, but some of the stuff I've learn, I suppose, in my research is that it's not just doing the same things earlier on, it's doing different things earlier on and being careful about what we do.
I say we deliver it as well. Like, I mean, you can touch on some of the sessions that you run. It's the messages you're giving them that you drip feed in, and you're like you explain with the basketballs there. It's just doing it a different way, isn't it? You know, certainly the sessions that you run, that and key messages and that sort of lifelong learning through sport, isn't it? That we're trying to achieve as well.
Yeah.
You want to touch on
Yeah,
that?
I think the key thing for us, what we tried to do in Ffion's been a big driver in this, is we're very much looking to develop student athletes for your academics and your foundations and your sport. In addition to that, obviously statistics, I come from a football background where statistics will tell you the chances are greater than 0.0 you're going to be a professional footballer. So when we have students at our school, we look and that they come in the door and that's their main passion, I will openly turn around and say, I'm not going to try and crush any dreams here, but you know, we are going to develop your academics first and foremost, and if you get there, we will push you towards that. So the stuff that Ffion's done, some of the coaches didn't really want to buy into it and lose that session, as we said earlier, into some of the sessions, and I think we just tried to look at the big picture and said, listen, we're developing lifelong learning here.
And I think it's
sacrifice a little bit.
to jump on what News just said. I think one of the other things then is, I think you are always going to have, we had resistance with coaches, you know, wanting to let their kids miss one session. But I think now if I want to get them together and feed it back and show them the benefit, they might buy in and be like, okay, next year. Or even then I'm like, okay, if you're not going to give up a session, you need to do what? In practice, what are you doing? So how are you developing these skills in practice? Because I think it's a multiple environment things where we can develop psychosocial skills, and I think it shouldn't be one or the other. If it's how we can marry both, and I think. But again, if you put it in practice, then feedback. I think that's the biggest thing. Was we do lots of great things, we don't feed it back, and we don't feed it back to the people in our environments and show, look, this is the benefit it had, because that helps with the education and the resistance. It did help that the head of academic was really for it too, to put it forward. So that's another point.